playing Smash or any other fighting game, you've undoubtedly heard the phrase the neutral game. The neutral game is a large point of discussion as it is easily one of the most important concepts in any game. However, due to it solely being a concept and a multi-layered one at that, it can be difficult to understand. The focus of this video is to give an extensive overview of my interpretation of the neutral game. I'll break down my understanding of it by defining certain things, explaining many common scenarios, and pulling from many other forms of media to get my point across. Now then, grab a drink, get some water, throw me on just before you go to sleep, do whatever you gotta do, and allow me to teach you about the Nooch. Simply put, the neutral game is a state of the game where you and your opponent have equal access to the same resources in a match. It's a neutral position for both of you. You might be thinking, okay, but what does that really mean? What is the significance of these so-called resources? Well, every character has fundamental resources in their toolkits, which is fully accessible in the neutral. Universal options such as jumping, running, walking, throwing out an air would fit this category. In a neutral position, you can do all that and more. However, there is one resource that newer players do not give enough focus to, which I think is a factor that really sets the pace of the neutral game. Stage control is by far the biggest determiner of neutral, as it can be applied to every single interaction in the game. For the sake of argument and understanding, let's define stage control. It is a position in the game where one person has a larger amount of access to a stage compared to the other person. This is usually at the center of the map or past it. Whoever is closer to the ledge is typically the one with little to no stage control. There are, of course, times in the game where nobody has an advantage of stage control. That is a neutral position, and thus the Nooch. Stage control, in my opinion, is the most significant factor when assessing the neutral game. That is what, in essence, embodies if somebody is either in neutral or not. We are going to look at multiple situations in the game and see how the stage impacts the options available to the one in a worse position. Your opponent is sitting in center stage and you're at a distance from them. You have access to almost all your options. Your movement and positioning are limited, however. Retreating will result in you cornering yourself, thus putting you in an even worse position. If you try to approach your opponent, you're potentially getting hit. You cannot avoid putting yourself at a risk. You're pretty much having to commit or give up stage control completely. Next, you're on a platform and your opponent is once again at the center of the stage. There is very little availability for you to attack your opponent or threaten them at all. You'll have to get down, which could result in getting hit or ending up back on the corner of the stage. There is no availability of stage control, so you cannot reposition either. Continuing on, you're hanging on the ledge and you only have your ledge options available. So you are pretty much stuck here and forced to choose an option because you can only wait for so long. And any of the options that you do choose all come at a great risk. Moreover, you're off stage and needing to recover. You have access to all your aerials, dodges, and a double jump. Assuming that isn't the first thing you burn when you go off stage, you are completely locked out of the map and have to prioritize your covering over anything else. In all of these situations, you are lacking stage control. It restricts you from being able to pressure your opponent or do something without putting yourself at a great risk. Meanwhile, the other person was free from any potential risk because they could simply repose or retreat or any number of options, infinitely greater than the ones who was in a worse position. Stage control is thus the major determiner of neutral and other positions in the game. Let's quickly examine a scenario where you are the one with stage control. Let's say that your opponent is on the ledge and you're waiting for their option. You can do much and cover every angle they could choose. Best of all, since you have access to all the stage control, you can decide how little or how much you want to commit in this interaction. If you watch high level play, you may notice that there appears to be periods of time where each player moves around and throws out attacks without either of them connecting upon each other. This is because there's many strategies to taking neutral, and they can range from very simple tactics to infinitely complex mind games. This is pretty much what is going on, and sometimes it can be hard to interpret. Before going in, it's important to know that movement should always be purposeful. You should not move with no purpose, just like you should not throw out an attack with no reason. Improperly moving can be just as detrimental to your play as throwing out a random laggy smash attack. When you move, you should have a plan in mind, or at least an idea of why you did what you just did. Don't just do a little wave dash because it's cool. Since movement is in real time and not turn-based like in a game of chess, it is important to understand what your 2.5DS can do and what they can accomplish. There are 6 ways to traverse in this checkered hell. Disclaimer of movement. Most traditional fighting games do not have dedicated blocking buttons. Thus, the only way one could defend would be to hold back on their stick. So, if someone were to move forward, they would be on the aggressive end, while the other person would be on the defensive end. As a core fundamental fighting game rule, moving forward / advancing / approaching is aggressive. Likewise, a similar principle is applied to Smash. In Ultimate, when you initially dash, there are a few frames where you cannot do anything. The first type of movement is the slowest, but also the safest. That is, walking. This is primarily used when it comes to micro-spacing. Unlike previous iterations of Smash, there is not much subtle movement like wave dashing in Melee and perfect pivoting in Smash 4. The movement is streamlined, making maneuvering overall easier, especially acting out of dash. At the same time, it limits the amount of micro-spacing. You either walk in or you're dashing. So therefore, walking is great for making tiny adjustments when near your opponent. Another thing that makes walking great is that it doesn't limit you in any way, shape, or form like the other movement options we'll take a look at. The second type of movement is running. This movement is a little more simple than the other ones, as this is just to accomplish one thing. Running is used for navigating this chessboard of Smash. You use it to simply close the gap between you and your opponent or widen the distance. You don't want to do this when you're so close, because in Ultimate, there are a few frames where you cannot do anything once you start your initial dash. So if you do it too close, you might just get hit out of it. Third is foxtrotting. This is the initial dash of a character. It travels a set amount of distance which varies by character. The main distance you'll be using this is at length from your opponent, a distance where running won't do the trick and your opponent is too far to walk into. It suffers from the same drawbacks that running does, in that you're stuck in the dash animation for a bit. However, this is a bit more prominent with foxtrotting, since this action will continue to occur. Additionally, you'll typically be a bit closer to your opponent when foxtrotting than outright dashing. Aside from the bursts of movement you get from it, you can also use it as a means of baiting your opponent. Foxtrotting in and out of your opponent's range can obscure when you're going to go in for an attack, so it makes it harder to know when you'll commit, if you decide to commit at all. Additionally, it allows for you to immediately stop and turn on a dime, unlike running. This makes dashing in and away less of a commitment. Another thing you can do with your foxtrotting is use it in tandem with a tilt or a smash attack for a burst range option. It gives you just a bit more range on your tilt specifically by combining a bit of your momentum for your dash with the hitbox of the move itself. I'm not sure if the momentum travels for things other than tilt, but remember that you can use other moves outside of your foxtrotting. It doesn't just have to be tilts. You can do anything out of foxtrot. Fourthly, it's time to take flight. The next movement is jumping. There are 2 types of jumps that are to be used in their own respective manners. Short hop is, well, as the name implies, it do be a short hop. A short hop allows you to have access to all your aerials while also staying non-committal. Being above your opponent in Smash is never a good position to be in, so when you do a short hop, you have all the pros of being in the air, while also minimizing that risk of not only being above your opponent, but being in the air comes with its own consequences. You can throw out aerials while slightly altering your position as well, which is very helpful for your positioning and spacing. This is because in short hops, as well as full hopping, there's carried momentum from your character. So if you're running and you do a short hop, you'll carry that into it. Jumping also shifts your hitbox, so you're able to avoid things such as low hitting moves and sometimes even mid hitting moves. Grabs are especially susceptible of not working if you jump over them, so that's a useful tip if someone's getting very grab happy. Having your momentum follow you will help you when it comes to macro spacing, as a little bit of drift can be the difference between your short hop aerial being safe on shield or being a free punish for your opponent. Some characters drift more than our Joy-Cons, and some move like a brick in the ocean. While short hopping is usually safe, you're vulnerable for a very brief period. 3 frames to be exact, plus however many frames it would take for the aerial to come out. However, there's still another drawback from short hopping near your opponent. This could open you up to getting hit if you short hop near their threat of effectiveness. Shit. Well, now I have to talk about the threat of effectiveness. I'll get back to that later. Another thing to note about short hopping is that it has a 0.85 times multiplier, meaning that if you do a short hop aerial, it'll be just a little weaker than the full hop or double jump variant. This is supposed to discourage people from just spamming Nair, but full hopping is a character's full hop. They have a set distance they go depending on the character, and using a full hop varies because not every character can use a full hop as applicably in the Nooch as, let's say, their short hop. Some can incorporate it very easily, but some would be committing hard if they choose to do so. They can be used effectively for timing mix-ups, since most people expect their opponents to short hop, since, well, short hopping is much more common. So a full hop will sometimes throw people off because of the parry timings. Additionally, a full hop has a lot more defensive applications than a short hop. The greater airtime and momentum gives you a better ability to retreat with it, and better repositioning. It can leave you vulnerable if done too closely to your opponent. That being said, short hops have a lot more aggressive capability, but essentially both benefit from the fact that you're in the air, so attacks that hit mid to low range like grabs, sub-normals, and projectiles can be avoided while applying pressure at the same time. Keeping up with the possibility of jumps, you can perform what is known as a tomahawk. A tomahawk is when you jump near your opponent, land, and then go for a grab, assuming that they shield in anticipation of you using an aerial. When you jump near someone, their immediate reaction normally is to shield, since typically when people jump in the air, they usually attack. It's like a Pavlov's dog situation, but that's a topic for another time. Fifthly, there's double jumping. I wanted to separate it from your first jump because there are distinct properties compared to your first jump, i.e. you can double jump from being in the air anywhere as long as you haven't already used it. You can't just jump, you can't do a full hop from anywhere else, but you can always double jump. Another obvious but big difference is that you cannot control the distance in which you ascend. With your first jump, you can at least do a short hop or full hop. With double jump, there's only one length. Finally, double jump has a distinct animation. Your character does a barrel roll in the air, and there's like a little demon platform that spawns underneath. Anyway, double jumping in neutral tends to be a little risky, seeing as they leave you airborne without a way to change momentum or reposition without an air dodge. However, just like a full hop, it can be used to retreat or as a mix-up on people's parry timings. Knowing these 5 types of movement options will help you when deciding how you wish to navigate in your current neutral interaction or the next. Spacing is one of those things that are difficult to define as it has a lot of variables, so I'll try to explain it as best as I can as a concept. When spacing, you aim to place your hitbox in a certain area, whether that be an aerial, a jab, or any move that does damage. Where that is depends on what you're trying to do. Most moves want to be spaced as far away as possible, since it inherently has an advantage. Moves spaced away from opponents keep you safe. This allows you to be able to apply pressure while being almost unpunishable. You do not even have to space your moves directly on your opponent either. Spacing moves help you control the area around you. For example, if you throw out a move as your opponent runs into it, then they'll have to stop or get hit. Even though the move did not hit, it still accomplished something. Sometimes it's much more important to deny space than it is to hit your opponent outright. One unique application of spacing is to do what's known as a cross-up. A cross-up is when you land on the opposite side of your opponent. This is achieved through drifting into your opponent rather than trying to land away from them. This makes it ambiguous as to where you will land, either directly in front or behind them. Some characters have a good out of shield option, but only in front of them. Crossing them up would make landing on their shields just a little bit safer. Objectives are goals in the game you set to achieve a certain interaction. Think of them as your win condition. If you force your opponent into this situation or hit them with this certain move, you win. Winning doesn't always equal you taking a stock or hitting your opponent, but you can accomplish any number of things that you set your mind to. Objectives can be as simple as, I want to punish my opponent for rolling, or I want to take control of the stage, or as complex as, I'm going to throw out a projectile to condition them to jump over it and see if I can hit them for jumping later on. Your objectives typically change in accordance to you and your opponent's percentages and positioning, but I'm going to generalize on what a character's objective generally tends to play out as. Initially, at the start of the game, it revolves around not only winning neutral and creating an opening, but landing a combo starter. If you're a zoner, you might prioritize gaining distance or charging a projectile. However, a more traditional character will probably be looking to get some damage at the start. Early game percentage combo starters are especially devastating because at the beginning of the stock, you'll be rewarded more for starting a combo than later. This is why you see top level players kind of fish for certain moves. That's because they're focusing on their objectives, which might be to land a specific move. We'll revisit this subject later on. When your opponent is around kill percent, it would make little sense for you to try and go for a down throw aerial. It wouldn't connect because they are way out of combo percentage. So the objective for an opponent at kill percent is, well, you still want to win the neutral and interact with your opponent, but your focus should center around how you're going to finish that stock. This can get muddied though because each character kills differently and therefore has to play differently. For example, a character who has really strong kill throws at high percent might look to get a throw to take the stock. A character that kills off of specific combos will try to look for the setup since that's their win condition. To end off kill percentages, I want to give advice to anyone that struggles to kill because that is something that I too can relate to. I got this from one of my favorite streamers named JM Croft. He is amazing, shout out to him. When it comes to finishing a stock, you want to play it out as though your opponent is not at kill percent. You did not get them to kill percent by simply fishing for a kill, so what sense does it make for you to fish now? Keep playing the same way you were when they were at 0%. Your goal should still be to take the stock, but prioritize not putting yourself in jeopardy with the hopes of getting a stock. While you might have your own game plan, it's important to remember that your opponent also has their own goals and objectives. Playing around them is sort of an objective in itself. Clearly, you would not like to get hit, so you're always planning on just that. The main goal is to hit your opponent and not get hit, but you can only do that if you know what your opponent is looking to do. It varies by too many factors to be able to give objective procedures to follow every time, but I can offer a bit of advice. Evaluate your character's strengths and weaknesses and compare it to the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent's character. What are your objectives and how do they clash with the other person's? Is the main plan to zone you out, or are they going to rush you down? Maybe you're heavy and the opponent plays a combo character who struggles to kill. Suddenly, your game plan is altered due to the other person. Play around what they want and don't let them get their win condition. In the situation with the heavy and the combo character, the heavy would expect to get comboed, but as long as they don't lose their stock, then they can take all the damage they want. The combo character knows that their combos are not the main focus. They would have to worry about how to take the stock and not let the heavy snowball the situation. Contrary to popular belief, there is no one strategy or move that is unbeatable or has no counterplay. Everything in the game can be played against and countered in their own way, so that means everything you do involves some sort of risk. Risk versus reward is how much of yourself you're willing to commit for a play in hopes of an outcome favorable for you. It is up to you to manage the risk you put yourself in as you play. That means being mindful of moves you're throwing out while factoring in variables. For example, if you whiff a smash attack at early percents, the worst thing that'll happen to you is you either get smash attack back or you get comboed. If you do that at higher percents, it's curtains. Your stock's gone, reduced to ashes. A few other things to consider too is your positioning on the stage, the amount of stock each of you have, and the characters you both play. The main focus of risk versus reward is to minimize how much risk you put yourself in while looking to get the highest reward for your action. If something's high risk and low reward, you should pretty much never go for it. That way you leave as little opportunity to get punished as possible.
Shit. Well, now I have to talk about the threat of effectiveness.
I'll get back to that later. Well, I guess it's later now, huh? Okay, before I get into this, I want to use a video from another game because some of the concepts still apply, and I feel like this person did an amazing job at laying this down. This is Verge's guide on rotation to Rocket League.
First thing to understand about rotation is a player's range for option coverage. Range is what is possible for a player to cover from their given position. Starting with your team, a good rotation is one that leaves as much area covered as possible, as close as possible, without leaving any opportunities for threatening touches from your opponent. When it comes to your opponent's range and your teammate's range, you have to read the play and ask yourself, given both these players' positions, when going for the ball, what's the most threatening possible outcome to my team? You have to make sure that the most immediate threat is covered first, but you have to cover it while staying as close to the play as possible so that you can cover every other possible outcome. This is called option coverage. You cover every option your opponents have at all times, and it will help you to get or keep possession of the ball more. This is how rotation works. If you see possibilities for your team, position to support those. If you see possibilities for your opponents, position to cover them. Now that you know all this, this is where things get tricky. When playing Rocket League, it's always important to visualize what could possibly happen next. And that means everything. You have to always think 2, 3, even sometimes 4 steps ahead. So while thinking about rotations, you want to think steps ahead. Ask yourself, what are all the possibilities here? And what will I need to do in the case that each of them happens? Anticipating what will happen and moving through rotations to cover those steps ahead is what's going to allow you to rotate efficiently.
Essentially, there's sort of a bubble around you, an area of effectivity as I like to call it. It's the range in which you can put out a hitbox or cover that area in some way. Depending on your character, this range will sometimes be a lot smaller, a lot bigger. It might have some blind spots, etc. A character like Marth is going to have a larger range of effectiveness than Mario, for example. Things start to get a little more complicated when you factor in movement. Every character has a dash attack as well. Some are utterly useless, some are a quick burst option to get in their opponent's range or get them off. For these characters who do not have an easily applicable dash attack in neutral, you usually don't have to factor in the distance of these moves, as they usually are high to medium risk and normally a low reward. Keeping the theme of Mario and Marth's range of effectiveness, let's draw out what they would look like if we factor in their dash attack into their range of effectiveness. Huzzah! Wow, would you look at that? Mario's looking like he's got a sword, doesn't he? Marth's range has gone up a bit too. Now, let's see these dash attacks in action. You see, even though they do have a dash attack, thus extending their range of effectiveness, it's not really something you should fear. That does not mean you should always neglect to consider their dash attack in your thought process, but try to focus less on if they're going to dash attack you, and instead focus on if you're in range of their more threatening moves. There are a few characters, however, that you should always consider their range of their dash attack. One of them is Fox. Fox's dash attack has the one priority that dash attacks shouldn't have. It combos into things. That means you have to avoid this move. It's a high risk, but it balances out by being a huge reward. Because you have to respect this move, you should always factor in the range of effectiveness, making his permanent range look something like this. The last thing I want to talk about with dash attack and range of effectiveness is that if someone's dash attack kills at higher percents, then you should start to respect it and factor it in. This is because this becomes this. When both you and your opponent are in each other's range of effectiveness, this is not considered neutral. Things have already gone into play. It becomes more of a game of who's going to get hit first. Of course, you can choose to disengage and reset, but you might get hit for it. The ability of patience and decision making is gone. You're forced to choose an option. You're in, and now things kind of just happen. I just wanted to make this distinction of it no longer being neutral, because some people will claim anything is neutral, and that's simply not true. Scramble situations are very chaotic and sort of random. I'm going to define them as moments in the game where both players are well within each other's range of effectiveness. The outcome nearly always ends in someone getting hit.
Watch where you walking. Hey, what you say?
Watch closely. You're about to experience a
Scramble situation. Before discussing attacks and moves, I want to cover the importance of frame data and why you don't have to learn a whole Wikipedia page of it. Most frame data that is deemed reactable starts at frame 17 and higher. That's not very slow, is it? As such, there are a lot of moves in this game that come out at frame 10 or faster. Generally, moves tend to be unreactable by nature. What I'm trying to get at is that you're not going to be reacting to that link near neutral, and you're not expected to be able to do so. So don't play like you can, because you can't. However, you can react to the position in which the link puts himself in before he does that nair. Knowing that your shield comes out on frame 1 and takes 10 frames to drop down is important. Knowing the frame data of every single move of every single character is needlessly unnecessary. Instead, try recognizing similarities amongst the moves to group them in. Jabs generally come out on frame 2, and although sometimes it can vary between coming out on frame 2 or frame 6, they're going to function as jabs regardless. They're low risk, low reward moves. Knowing that it comes out on frame 5 rather than 2 is going to be a bit helpful, but it's not going to change the experience of how you use that jab very much. The same things can be applied with Nair as another example. Nairs usually have quick hitboxes, and knowing that it comes out on frame fast and has little end lag usually is all it takes to know about that move. My recency bias says that most Nairs tend to be really safe on shield if done properly and spaced well. Of course, it's a little more to it than that, but that's just a general rule of thumb that I play by. If you find that a character's move gives you a hard time, then you should consider looking that character up. UltimateFrameData.com is free to use and is amazing. So when you feel like wolves are getting too comfortable spamming Nair on your shield, you'll know that it starts up on frame 7, which is a bit slow for a Nair. It's also -4 or 5 on shield. So if your character has a really good at a shield option, you'll be able to punish it on shield. By looking at specific frame data of a character's moves, I was able to identify 2 solutions to solve a problem I was having. I can air-to-air wolf with my superior nair that comes out on frame 3, and I can punish his nair on shield with my amazing frame 3 at a shield option. Yes, I'm Dr. Mar. In the psychology field, this is called problem solving. You identify a problem, so you look for a solution. Your natural curiosity of reasoning will lead you down this path, and because you were actively trying to solve the problem, you remembered the solution because it took effort for you to solve it. In my opinion, this is how you should learn frame data, with problem solving. Now that we've looked at frame data, its application, and learning it, I feel like it's time to discuss moves and the different features that they have and the appropriate time to use them in neutral. Keep in mind that this video is focusing mainly on neutral, so that means that I'm going to be talking about a general application of moves when you and your opponent are on equal footing. If I were talking about another state of the game, options would be utilized differently, and so would its application. Every character in Smash has a general fundamental toolkit of having tilts, jabs, aerials, etc. In addition to this, their moves can fall into a sort of trope from where a move is an archetype of a certain design, just as I mentioned with Nairs earlier. The first one we'll take a look at are jabs. I must love jabs so much since I've mentioned them about 1 billion times. I will briefly mention them, but I think I gave everyone a full picture about them by now. You're not going to just hit your opponent with the range of your jab. You usually rely on other factors to hit them with it. If you whiff the move, however, then it is no big deal. You won't get hard punished for it. It's mainly used in approaching, combo enders, resets, and as a pseudo poking tool, so use them as, well, jabs. Keep in mind that most characters have multi-hit jabs. They tend to be a higher commitment, but also a higher reward, usually netting somewhere between 20%. The last hit typically has enough end lag for most characters to get a hard punish on shield, and after the 11th hit, most characters can roll through and once again get a hard punish. The next type of attack move is a poke. A poke is a move that aims to either create space safely or to pressure your opponent as safe as possible while committing as least as possible. A good example of these types of moves are Marth and Lucina's aerials, or just all their moves really. Their fairs and bears are safe spacing tools that swat your enemies away with very little end lag. It doesn't do that much damage, it's not really a combo tool either, nor does it kill extremely early. Don't get me wrong, they definitely do have some kill power and combo potential, but that's not the main purpose of these moves, unless it's something like a falling up air maybe. Get off me options are moves that are used to escape scramble situations. They typically come out really quick and do not have a lot of range. Usually this move does not connect into anything else and thus is normally used to get people off of you. Doesn't start any combos, it doesn't kill. For example, let's look at King DDD's down tilt. What's its utility as a move? What does it accomplish? It can create a tech situation and kill at really high percents in the corner. However, it functions well as a get off me tool. It is the fastest move in his arsenal, coming out on frame 6. Even faster than his jab, which is laughably frame 10. Oh, King DDD mains. So, it usually comes out in scenarios where you're trying to create space and get your enemy off of you. Think of it as those Ken players in Street Fighters who use Wake Up DP.
The advantage of using a Wake Up Invincible move is that it will put a stop to your opponent's pressure and deal some damage to them.
Characters out of shield options vaguely describe what I'm getting at with get off me tools. Moves like Bowser's up B, Mario/Doc's up B, Marth Lucina's up B's, Cloud's up B, the list goes on and on. These moves are meant to act as quick options to throw out to create space via hitting your opponent. Some moves even kill, like Doc's for example. You can use any move as a get off me tool as long as it achieves the goal. It's not just limited to these few examples I brought up. Even a jab could be used as a get off me tool. The next archetype of move are anti-airs. It can be thought of as more of a strategy than a type of move. Similar to get off me options, you can really make any move into an anti-air. In some other fighting games, there are moves that have a distinct property of being invincible against all aerials. For example, in Dragon Ball FighterZ, every character's down heavy attack is air invincible. There is no way for an aerial to hit someone performing a down heavy. It makes aerial approaches a little risky. Ultimate doesn't have a mechanic like that. Instead, there are other properties that make moves really good for anti-airing. Usually, anti-airs work best when they're a generous-sized hitbox, disjointed, or have invulnerability on the character's hurtbox. Most importantly, they have to cover the area above your character. A good example of an anti-air would be Marth and Lucina's up tilts. These have everything you want in an anti-air. Against any aerial or special that doesn't have invincibility, this move will be able to beat it out 100% of the time your opponent's above you. So whenever you fight a Yoshi that does nothing but nair when they're in the air after every single hit, you know to challenge that damn boot whiff next time. Most character smash attacks can be used to anti-air very well. They typically have an anti-air property that makes them reliable hard punishes. Mario's up smash can be used as another example of a good anti-air. The hitbox goes slightly above past his head, making it a little disjointed. His head has invincibility for a few frames as well. Anti-airs are not the only strategies to punish aerials. Air-to-airing is the concept of using one of your own aerials to hit someone who's going to jump to do an aerial, or beating out someone's aerial by meeting them in the air with a move of your own. A good example of this move would be Fox's Dare, or at least I'm able to get away with using it as an air-to-air. The move comes out really fast, lasts a really long time in the air, and has a massive hitbox at the end. Due to Fox's speed and his large full height, he is able to cover the area around his opponent where they would most likely jump and throw out an aerial. This will catch that, thus beating out their aerial. It's not the greatest though to try to hit someone out of their own aerial due to its lack of disjointed range. Palutena's Bear can be used as an air-to-air as well. It might even be a more effective air-to-air than the previous example. It may not come out as fast, but it's intangible, so if it ever hits another aerial, it's just going to beat it out. To end this portion off, I want to say get crafty with your move and see which ones can beat out your opponents who's going to be above you, or already is. Kill moves are self-implied. Kind of thinking about it, a lot of them are. Anyway, kill moves are moves that have large amount of knockback but usually come at a deficit. Either the move has short range, long end lag, or a large amount of startup. An example would be Fox's up smash. It comes out really fast and is very strong, but it has a lot of end lag. So if Fox misses his move, he's gonna eat a hard punish. Although this is generally a rule of thumb to kill moves, there's plenty of exceptions. There are some moves that just kill that have no negative to them. Snakes up tilt's dumb. Enough said. Combo starters are moves that start combos. Combo starters do tend to be a little smaller in range, thus having a bit more risk involved when being used. They also require you to be pretty close to your opponent. It's a medium to high risk move for a medium to high reward if landed. Mario's a character that excels at getting combos and dealing damage. The thing is, however, that his moves don't have that much range. His bear has the greatest range in his kit, but has limited combo capability. It's not a development oversight. If his bear could easily set up into other combo strings, then it'd be way too powerful a move. The second to last type of move I want to talk about are projectiles. Just like many attacks, projectiles are used with different goals in mind. Some projectiles are meant to control space, some are meant to set up opponents, and some are simply kill moves. Let's look at Pikachu's T-Jolts as an example of a projectile. They can retreat with it, they can approach with it, they can set up edge guards with it, or ledge trap with it. It does a lot. Thankfully, not every single projectile is as applicable in so many situations. It's important to identify what projectiles your opponent has and how they are using it. Most importantly, evaluate your own projectile and how you use it and in what situation. Samus traditionally uses her charge shot and missiles as a way to zone her opponents out. Missiles are kind of slow, so they take up room, forcing you to either shield them or jump over them. Her other projectile, charge shot, varies on how big it is. A fully charged charge shot typically is reserved for big reads, for example to catch an opponent landing or an aggressive option. Fully charged charge shot is not the type of projectile to be thrown out willy-nilly. It's too valuable a resource for that. That would be anything around under 75% charge or something. The smaller the charge shots are, the more they're being used as a way to take up space and condition others. Since they move at such a slow distance, it makes a good tool to force something out. But you can even combo a smaller shot into a dash attack or a grab. The last type of move I want to talk about are retreating options. These are attacks that you're going to throw out to gain distance from your opponent. The goal of the move is to get away. Not only to retreat, but also you're able to pressure your opponent if they try to chase you. Moves that are difficult to challenge due to their properties are typically good in this situation. For example, Byleth's Bear and Fair are great examples of retreating options. If someone were to approach them while they backed up, the aerial would either hit them or zone them out. Another retreating option is simply disengaging via moving away. This will not always work, but it's less committal than it is to position yourself for an aerial or throwing out a tilt. If your character is fast on their feet or have amazing aerial drift, it makes moving even more of a viable option to get away. The last topic I want to discuss about in this video is counterplay. I think this is something that confuses a lot of new players, and I hope that this helps them understand this part of the game. In a match between high-level players, you often see them constantly swinging at each other, even if they are not in the best position to do so. New players might interpret this as though you always have to constantly try to hit your opponent, which is not the case. They mistake counterplay for blind aggression. Counterplay can be defined as choosing an option that beats out your opponent's option. Very simple definition, huh? That's because it is. However, the methodology is a little more tricky, and that's what I'm going to try to explain myself. As I've mentioned throughout this video, there are certain goals each character and each player have. In neutral, it is typically to, well, win. Unfortunately, that is one vague goal. This is the part of the game where there are most variables. This is why it's important to try to understand your opponent's goals so that you can counterplay them. For example, if you're playing against someone who has a rushdown type of playstyle, your main counterplay is going to involve keeping them out via boxing them out, zoning, baiting, etc. You don't want to let them in. You'll want to avoid their combo starters and deny them the space to get their pressure started. Once you identify what you have to counterplay, this is where you get creative, as everything in this game has some sort of counterplay to it. If you're playing against a grappler, your goal is to avoid the grab, and this can be done in multiple ways. Grabs generally get beaten out by attacks, so swinging a lot in close encounter situations would be a good way to avoid getting grabbed. Another way would be to be in the air a lot. However, both of these solutions come with their own form of risk. There is no one size fits all when it comes to counterplay, unfortunately, or fortunately. Throwing out a lot of moves can be beaten out by either baiting them or shielding them and punish with an out of shield option. Being in the air will leave you vulnerable to anti-airing and possibly put you in a bad position. Your counterplay should adapt with your opponent's play, because there's counterplay to counterplaying. Without getting too complicated, I'll say your game should take a back and forth between you and your opponent implementing new strategies and sifting through the ones that work while eliminating the ones that don't. After all, if your opponent doesn't adapt, then you shouldn't either. If you keep getting caught by one thing, then you should probably stop getting hit by it. And that's the end of the Nooch. I know that some of the concepts I talked about were rather abstract, and at times it was like I wasn't talking about the game, and at times I wasn't. I created this video because I wanted to contextualize how I, as an experienced player, understand the game. It's how I make sense of it. It's my hope that letting you into my mind has helped you to be able to understand your own view of the game. We all perceive things differently, and sometimes it can be hard to tap into your own thinking because there's a lot that goes on at once. For those who already have had an understanding of the game, it's also my hope that I gave you a new perspective or defined a specific term that you may like but never thought of. Hey y'all, thank you for sticking through to shout out to my Patreons. I want to first start off by thanking our patrons. We got 4 members so far, so thankfully the list is still short enough for me to be able to read everybody's name. So we're gonna start with that. Pillar Button, Darnell, Samaj, and Ocherry. So thank you all for literally putting money into my pockets to help fund this video. Greatly appreciated. If you would like to be a Patreon member, there's a link in the description below. You don't have to be one, but it goes a long way and it helps keep me motivated when making content for this channel. Secondly, I'd like to thank Andy for helping me with the making of the script. When I first presented it to him, it was 16 pages long, and he told me that brevity is the key to one's heart, or some gospel stuff like that. Thank you for looking through that. It was a lot. He helped me reduce it, and I'm grateful for that. So that's gonna do it for this video. Be on the lookout for the next part, which is going to be called the Banji State. We're gonna look at the advantages of being an advantage in Smash. So we're gonna do like a little 3-part series. I don't know if it's gonna be as long as the Nooch, but we'll just have to see when it starts. And I'm just hoping that I can continue providing content for you all